Welcome back to Not a Straight Line with me, Pete Daly-Dickson. This is the show that explores the non-linear journeys of artists and entrepreneurs to inspire you as you zigzag through your own non-straight line life. And this week I connected with Chris Bantock. As our second conversation for 2025, it made sense to bring on another significant member of Agency Aid, which we heard about last week from Laura West. And if you haven't listened yet to that episode, make sure you add it to your list. Chris is an ex-agency owner, having grown and sold his business, and he now provides support and guidance to agency owners, old and new, through the Agency Adventure, which gives agency owners the knowledge, skills, and belief to be great business owners. This, however, has only been possible after multiple zigs and zags on his own journey through corporate life, study, and, like all of us, the jarring pandemic slowdown. In this episode, we talk about education, growth media, agency development, and personal growth. And Chris's tenacity of continued learning and growing shone through during our chat in spades. It's a true embodiment of how our journeys are not a straight line and how you can surprise yourself with how much you've achieved when you take a moment to reflect with a friend. But enough waffle. Let's get into this episode with my good friend, Chris Bantock. Chris Bantock, welcome to the Not a Straight Line podcast.
Thank you. Thank you, Pete. Thank you for having me and inviting me on.
It's always a pleasure to have anyone and everyone on this podcast, even more so when I know them a little bit. I mean, we've known each other a relatively long time, probably 4 or 5 years at least, I would say.
Yes, it was just before lockdown, wasn't
it? Yeah. So it's always special for me to have these not a straight line conversations with people that I've known for a while, and just sort of go a little bit deeper into the relationship. So without much further ado, let's jump into the conversation at the usual point. When you saw that question that I sent by email, what was the first point in time that came to you? High stakes, high pressure, big zig, big zag?
It's such an interesting question, first of all. And actually, first of all, thank you for inviting me on. It's a pleasure to be here. It was a really interesting question because I immediately jumped to something that was a theme that's happened through my non-linear line. But I think the biggest single sort of tipping point for me was leaving corporate world to go out on my own and into the big wide world.
Right. Well, let's dig into that, because that's a pretty significant zag, and that the listener may well either have experienced that or be thinking about experiencing that. So what was the story leading up to that? Why the change? Let's just dig in.
Well, yeah. So as most people's story starts, once they sort of leave university or school or whatever. So I left university. For some reason, my final year, I focused on finance, and numbers really aren't my thing. So I gave myself 6 months to get a job in marketing, or else I'd have gone down the accounting route. Fortunately, I got a job in marketing.
So what made you land on that? So if you studied finance, what was it about marketing? Was that what you'd done earlier?
My final thesis was all marketing based. Everything that interested me in throughout the course was marketing led.
So what was your degree? What did you study?
It was a business studies.
Okay.
A business studies degree. Going into that, no idea what I wanted to do. Came out of it, still no idea really what I wanted to do. But knew it wanted to be somewhere in the realms of business. Somewhere I sort of gravitated towards the marketing side of things. So I ended up securing a job working for Hewlett-Packard. So I worked as a marketing manager for their consumables division. So this was toner cartridges and floppy drives and things like that. So that's showing
you've just aged yourself there, Chris.
I know.
In one fell swoop, one sentence. Like, well, no. One question might even date you even more. Is that were they 3.5 or were they 5.25?
We graduated to 3.5.
Oh my God!
But it's the most profitable part of their whole operation. It's amazing. And so it was really interesting because I actually learnt more probably in 6 months than I did in sort of 4 years doing the degree.
What does that tell you?
It was, exactly. It was a mail order. We produced 2 catalogues a year and a telesales operation. That was amazing. It was good. I ended up going through their sales training program, which at the time was only second to sort of Xerox. So that zag, as you call it, from university into a corporate environment was just brilliant. I learned so much in that world, and got a very solid training, which has stayed with me to this day. So the corporate world, I say corporate world because I left Hewlett Packard and joined a small computer reseller. I did a number of different jobs in HP in the 4 years I was there, ended up marketing and sales. So I worked for it was actually a small company. So I was out of corporate world, but we were a Hewlett Packard reseller and it felt like we were still part of Hewlett Packard and we were dealing with sort of large corporates. So
why did you make that zag out of interest?
That zag was because I wasn't getting what I wanted in terms of my progression in the sales world within Hewlett Packard. They work on a channel model, and there were a few people that I knew that had left and joined this channel partner and were loving it. So that's when I left them. But that was excellent. I learned again so much there in a smaller environment, dealing with my key account was Glaxo, ended up being one of the top salespeople there. Loved that, and then unfortunately that business went out of business. The financial director wasn't as honest as he should have been, as it turned out. So that was a shame. So I then joined a bigger reseller in terms of Computer Center. From Computer Center, I actually got made redundant from Computer Center. Our values were not necessarily aligned, shall we say? But that zag, I took a year out. I did an MBA.
Okay, I never knew that about you. Would you say that there was any grand design on your part? I mean, I like just go for the listener. Chris is shaking his head. Well, I should say that in America, shaking your head is nodding, as we say in England. So
it was a negative shake of the head.
A negative shake of the head is going from side to side. So just going back before you went to university, business studies, was that because why? Well, why not a specific subject that you were like really interested in? What was it that you thought you were going to get as a result of doing business studies?
Because there wasn't a specific subject I was interested in. I mean, I did a geography and history A level, and I still love both of those things. But I don't know. I don't think I could see a career in either of them.
So what about even younger then? Maybe secondary school, even pre-secondary school. What was Chris really into, and what excited him?
Mostly sports related stuff. School, I did a lot of cross country, played a lot of rugby. It was definitely and tennis as well. So I played tennis to get out of playing cricket. Cricket wasn't one of my sports. But yeah, so sport is where I really, that was the part of that, my childhood that sort of stands out. No particular interest in anything. Hence, business studies degree. It is a fairly generic degree, and it gives you the opportunity to open up into so many different areas.
Well, either your parents in business, did you have that as a...
Yes.
Okay. Did they corporate or self-employed?
No, my father was very much corporate. He worked for the British Transport Docks Board, and yeah, he was very, very corporate in business. And I think I saw a successful person there and go, okay, I would like a little bit of that. Seems like a good route to go. It's like when people have family-owned businesses. It's a natural graduation, isn't it? But we didn't have a family-owned business, but I think I probably looked up to him and the success that he had and goes, okay, probably something in that for me.
So if I can study what business is and what it's about, I can get into that, and I can have a. Did you see stability and security? Was that something that attracted you?
Um, Not really, I don't think. That's such an interesting question. But you said, was a lot of what I do by design? It's not. I'm very sort of go by gut feel. What feels right? Very
Intuition.
emotive. Go with the flow. I never planned what it was that I was going to do, but I am one that will take opportunities as and when they come. That's been a big part of my line. It's not a straight line. Just in the small bit from university to Hewlett Packard to two other companies, they're hugely different.
So what did you see in your dad's career that led you down, initially starting down that path?
I, there must be something in there around stability. Actually, you're right, because I saw him as a very successful businessman. In his own job. He was essentially, he was port director Humber. He looked after all the Humber ports, so very well respected in his world, and we had a good life. It was stable, nice house, good family, everything that I wanted for my future self.
Do you have siblings?
No, no. So again, it was, I think that's probably partly to do with my own wanting to. I'm very confident in going out and doing what I want to do because I've never had to have that that check and balance with other people.
Family dynamics are just endlessly fascinating to me. Only child, eldest child, middle child.
No, you're not going to get any of that in this conversation. But my father was the eldest of three, so I've seen all that side.
So you kind of not by luck, but just kind of process of elimination. Business studies just seem to be okay. Did you see it as potentially an easy option? Did you see it as like it's not gonna tax me? It's going to be pretty straightforward. Were you looking for ease or challenge or no?
I was looking for a stepping stone,
Right.
and that's what it was. It was a stepping stone to something else. What that something else was, I had no idea, but I knew doing a business studies degree, it would open me up to lots of different things. And from there, I could work out what it was I enjoyed, what it was that I didn't, but also get an understanding of how things work together.
So a little bit of design there, really. It's not just like throwing a dart at a dartboard and just sort of going with whatever came up. There's definitely, sounds to me anyway, some considered thought about future options that might be available to you from taking this particular step.
Yes, but the only intention was that first step. I didn't know where the next step was going to be afterwards. I think corporate big company is a natural route for lots of graduates because it does open them up to lots of different areas, working with other people, et cetera, et cetera. So, I certainly didn't come out of that go, oh, I need to go and become a consultant or go out on my own or set up a small business. I wasn't entrepreneurial in that respect. I wasn't sort of buying sweets from the local shop and selling them at a profit to kids at the age of 10. I've never had that level of entrepreneurial spirit inside myself, but I needed to give myself the knowledge to give me the confidence to go and do something else.
The next step. Would you say that's one of if not the main reasons for your success? However we define success, we can perhaps get into that. That you have just focused on what that next step is, trusting in a way that the next step will become
Yes.
available.
Yeah. This is very reflective and I love it. Because I've never really thought about it like that. But yes, my line has been one step at a time. And there's never been that, okay, what's my 10-year plan? It's never really been that considered. Everything that I'm doing is one step at a time, and I can almost chart my line by the steps. When I'm in that step, it's okay. What do I learn? What can I build on?
How can I grow?
That's gonna take me to the next step. But I used the word earlier, sort of around confidence, and I think a lot of each step, you're building more and more confidence in yourself. Now that comes from capability, but it also comes from sort of success. It also comes from actually building that belief in yourself.
Yeah, courage in a way.
Courage, yeah.
So we started this bit of the conversation by you mentioned leaving corporate and going self-employed. How long had you been in corporate? We know that you'd gone away and done your MBA. That's a pretty significant change of direction. Or maybe it wasn't. Maybe it seemed like the next obvious step. How was it to you as you think back?
It was the next obvious step in building confidence in myself.
Tell me more about that.
Well, I've gone down the marketing route, gone down the sales route, knew about that. Obviously, still had the grounding from the business studies degree. But so what I see now is today that a lot of people sort of they gather qualifications like they're going out of fashion. I'm accredited in this. I've been through this course. I've done that, and I actually think it is to give people confidence that they are. I've gone through this coaching qualification. I'm an accredited coach, but and I think the MBA was that step in building that confidence at that time and taking that to, again, giving me that confidence to be able to go out there and look, I've got a master's degree. First person in our family to get a master's degree. That wasn't the driver, but that was the outcome. But it was interesting because in that period, I also started to explore the entrepreneurial side of myself. And myself and a colleague that I used to work with, we set up a mail order for CD-ROMs into education. And we did some deals with distributors, built up a portfolio of CD-ROMs for education. And it was very early days of that technology at that time. And it was building on my Hewlett-Packard knowledge of building catalog, mail order, telesales. But it was for us. I put the catalog together.
The Cork Express or something like that, was it?
Yeah, it was. It was something like that. It took me hours. But that gave me that flavor of that freedom that I think you get working for yourself or for a smaller business.
And that was that straight after your MBA? You went from your MBA into that?
Well, no, it was sort of during. It was sort of a little sort of almost side project because, the MBA was, although it was a year out full-time course, it didn't necessarily tax me full-time. But that was building up, again, knowledge within a sector. So, we were aiming at the education market. I remember putting a computer in the back of the car, going around from school to school, because they didn't have computers, or they didn't have computers with CD-ROMs in, and demonstrating Microsoft dinosaurs to them.
Okay. Was that Encarta, Microsoft Encarta?
Yeah, that's right. And they were just blown away. How you got all that information on this disk? I love the forefront of technology. And I think that sort of came from, actually working at Hewlett-Packard, got into the technology and how that was changing, because the pace of change isn't what it is now, but it was still pretty fast then. I remember seeing the first touchscreen computer at Hewlett-Packard, the plotters, when we used to have acetates when you did overhead projections.
Yeah.
And to get your acetate, you put them on a plotter. And I just stood there for hours watching this thing go and pick up a pen and go, another pen. It was amazing. But again, that CD-ROM piece, again, was a huge advancement. You're going through that curve of educating people before they buy or before they get into, very much in the early adopter phase.
And how did that business go? Because being at the front, the forefront of tech, the early adopter stage, it's very exciting, but it's hard to make sales, isn't it?
Yeah, it was. it was very hard, but I walked away from that business because the partner that I was working with wanted to go in one direction, and I wanted to go in another. So it was ultimately his business, but I was a key part in it. So in the end, I just walked away from that.
So what way did you want to go and why?
I wanted to just focus on the education market. He wanted to go into the games world, which was a big part of the CD-ROM world. All the computer games that we see now, that was the beginning. That was the beginning of it all. So it was fine. I mean, what I've always done is, when one door shuts, you take away the knowledge that you've learned and the confidence, put them all in a bag and go off to the next thing. It allowed me to focus back on the MBA, and I ended up getting a job with Philips Media, so back into the corporate world, in their education department. And because Philips had a competitive platform called CDI, it's like the VHS Betamax back in the video days. So I ended up being the sales and marketing manager for CDI into the education market.
Right. So what was it about the education market and then wanting to go to work in corporate, but in the education specific arena? What was it about that appealed to you? It feels like quite a draw, enough for you to walk away from business you were involved in.
Yes. I think it was the fact that the technology could make such a difference. And, education is a wonderful world to apply that sort of technology, where it can make a huge difference. I mean, if you think about the role of technology, IT, and computers in education over the years, it's amazing. When I did the again, I'm dating myself here, but when I did my business studies degree, there were no computers. We used the computer once in our statistics course. The exercise tossing a coin, and you recorded 100 coin tosses, heads or tails, and you put that into a computer, and it spat out a punch card. That punch card was sent away for analysis. A week later, we got the results back.
When was the last time you remembered that particular point of your life, Chris?
Oh, God knows. But it always comes up in my head when, I look at, my children have just been through university and everything's online. Everything's computerized. It's just chalk and cheese to when I was there. And I think it's that whole drive of, I love being at the forefront of technology and applying it, seeing what a difference that can make. In the education world, you can make a huge difference.
Is it all positive in your view?
From a developmental and learning perspective, yes. From sort of screen time and all of that side of things, possibly no. But like everything, I think it's all about balance. So on the whole, yes, 100%. I think it can make a huge difference to somebody's learning, because people learn in so many different ways, and technology, IT allows people to do that.
So why, seeing as we're like talking about education, why do you think it is that even with all the advances in technology and the ability to find out pretty much anything you want to do and how to do it, you just go to YouTube or DuckDuckGo or wherever, why is so much of the education system still focused on memorization and working alone? I mean, one of the things you learn when you get into the world of work, I'm sure you've experienced this, is that it's teamwork. They say teamwork makes the dream work. You're never on your own. If you're on your own, there's almost like something wrong with you. And you look at it, the greats like Richard Branson. He said his superpower is finding people better than him and surrounding himself with them. So with all the advances in technology, why hasn't the education system, if you like, moved along with it and educating about the things that the stuff in the technology can't give you? Do you have any views on that?
Yeah. Yes, because it's a system, and it's an old system, and it's an antiquated system. It's built on the way the world was back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, reading, writing, and arithmetic, and I still don't think it's moved on hugely. I think education lacks preparing people, students for today's world. The things that you said there about sort of collaboration and teamwork. Yes, definitely. That's you get that in sport, and that's about it.
What else would you do if you were in charge of changing the education system? What would you put into it to prepare young people for the world of today and the future?
I think a lot of soft skill training needs to be put into education.
What does that mean to you?
Learning how to communicate with people, understanding a bit more around psychology and the way people operate and the way people learn, how to influence people, how to ask questions, how to listen, all those sort of skills that, they don't teach as a main part of the curriculum. Yes, you still need the basics, but these things would be the differentials that will take you into the modern world. It's a beast that isn't easy to change. It's not easy to change. I mean, the way they prepare children for the future is you've got to do your A levels, then you've got to go to university because everybody can go to university now, and that's your route. Yes,
There's your straight line route in a way.
There's your straight line.
There's almost like a societal conditioning that you go to primary school, secondary school, college, job, second job, third job, fourth job, die. So
yeah,
there's got to be more to life than that, surely.
Well, exactly. And when I was running the agency, we had a client that was a university technical college, UTCs, and they were from the age of 14, but they were practical based education. And what they did was leverage whatever was the predominant industry within an area. So the one we dealt with was in Aylesbury, and it was all about building and construction. That was their main focus. The one at Heathrow was all about aeronautical engineering.
And Coventry might have been cars and, whatever the industry it is. Yeah.
That's right. And part of that was having vocational learning. They go in and work with, the industries in that area would work with the college. It was an amazing route for people to go down. Yeah, and I know there's been a lot of work around apprenticeships and things like that, and it is getting better. Yeah, but I still think we've got a long way to go.
So you've walked away from your CD-ROM business because it's not going the direction you want to go. You get a job with Philips Media, CDI. Was that a success? I've used that word a couple of times. Let's actually just talk about that for a second. What does success mean to you?
I think what success meant to me then and what it means to be now are completely different things. I think as you go along your journey, your life changes, you get married, you have kids, what success looks like changes. When I was young, free and single, success was something completely different.
So how old were you when you started working for Philips Media, and what did success look like to you then?
How old was I? I must have been 30s, early 30s.
Okay.
I think success was trying to make a name for myself. So I went back to the sales job for the reseller, Hewlett-Packard reseller. Success there was being the top salesperson. Yeah. And earning shed load of money. That was what success looked like. Philips Media, I think it was more around proving myself. Success looked like more around proving I can do this, I can make a difference, I can manage a team, we can get results. So we've gone from an I to a we. So that, success was very, very different then than it, and again, it's very different to what it is now.
What does success look like to you now?
Retirement, mate. Retirement.
Well, we know you're 100 from what you were saying
well,
earlier.
Exactly. No, I mean, success now looks like building something that will be able to go on without me and make a huge difference to a lot of agencies, to a lot of people. That's what success looks like. With the agency adventure, looking to actually build something that will work without me, that's a vehicle for helping agencies to become remarkable businesses.
I'm glad we've touched on that, because we've kind of put almost a flag in the sand, a marker in the sand that we can circle back to.
Mm.
But I want to bring us back to Philips CDI, Philips Media. How long were you in there, and was that the corporate job that you left to start
No,
working?
no, there's one more.
Oh, wow!
There's one more.
Endless zigs and zags. It's great. So what was the step, and why did you take it? What were you looking to learn and build confidence in that step?
No, the zag on this one was forced on me. So I was made redundant from Philips Media. Philips decided to focus on the games part of what they were doing instead of the education part.
It seems like video games is your nemesis.
I know. So, in fact, they actually a year later pulled out the video games market as well. So I think it was a gradual reduction, but it was worst week of my life. My father passed away, and I got made redundant in the same week.
Oh my word!
So one focuses the other, but again, these things happen for a reason, and I'm a strong believer of that. And
was your father's death sudden, or had he been?
No. He's been ill for 15 years, suffered with Parkinson's. So it wasn't sudden, but it still always hits you, however much you prepare for it. But
so on one hand, a bit of a relief knowing that he's not suffering anymore, but obviously you've still got that loss in your life, haven't you?
Yeah, of course. But it puts things into perspective. Talking to people that, when they've been made redundant, their world's just caving in on them. Having those two things happen in the same week meant, okay, well, I've been made redundant, so what? It's not actually that important. There's, having life and family around you is far more important. But it meant another zag, and I thought, okay, what next? What do I do next?
Were you married by this stage?
No, I wasn't. No. So I went down the stage of, okay, I'll see if I can get some consulting, sales and marketing consulting work with people that are focusing on the education market. I know the market. I know sales and marketing. I'm sure I can add some value along the way there. And that was great. I ended up getting a contract with Microsoft in their education department. And 6 months later, they took me on full time. So I ended up at Microsoft. Doesn't get much bigger than that. I was there for 7 years, and so started off in the education department, but then moved very much into the small business group, as they called it, and worked with a lot of key influencers in the small business market. So Federation of Small Businesses, Chambers of Commerce. So I really got to know that whole small business ecosystem, if you like. So that was the next zigzag, or next zag. What's the difference between a zig and a zag?
I don't know. I think one goes one way, one goes the other. It's still a change of direction, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, that was a pretty big zig, I think, because it sort of laid the path for the next sort of 7 years. If I hadn't been made redundant, there's no way I would have ended up at Microsoft. If I hadn't been made redundant, from Computer Center, I wouldn't have done an MBA probably.
So again, just a real testament to having confidence in yourself, an element of self-belief there, doing things that are going to grow that confidence through increased capability. Obviously, you need the courage to be able to take that step. But if you focus on where you are and learning and growing as much as you can where you are right now, you can trust that the next thing is going to become available. I think it's a textbook example of what and how a non-straight line life evolves.
Yeah, and each one is a stepping stone. I've used that analogy already. It really is. Without having the experience of setting up the catalog business into education, I wouldn't have got the job at Philips Media. Without Philips Media, I wouldn't have got the job at Microsoft. Each one is a stepping stone to another.
You've talked earlier, Chris, about not having grand designs, on your life, and even I think you said not really having 10-year goals in the future that you're aiming towards. Is that really true, or on reflection, can you see that there was something pulling you, even if it was just to be the best version of Chris that you could possibly be?
I think that was my pull. I did not have, I didn't want to. Well, I did actually. Yeah, I sort of set a goal to retire at 40, missed that. Retire at 50, missed that. It goes on.
All the way to
but
100.
yeah, well, I'm not quite there yet, but no, my line's been very much by osmosis, and and that's fine for me. Every step has been a progression, which I think is really important, and learning so much along the journey. Especially recently, but even going back to Microsoft days, I learned so much in Microsoft, especially sort of how to navigate corporate world, deal with some of the politics and stuff that you get in corporate environments, but also in terms of my skill sets, what I could do. The corporate world is very good at investing in people, and so you get to learn new skills, whereas I think nowadays in the smaller business agency world, especially, we don't have that luxury that we invest in people, and I think we need to start looking at investing in people a lot more. So that was one of the things that came out of corporate world was my skill set just developed in things like presentation skills or speaking or whatever it is, leadership skills. These are things that you negotiation skills, courses that you went on to just to improve. So I'm really sorry, but I did not have any ultimate goal as to where I was heading. So wherever I ended up was okay.
But that for me, that's the whole point of this podcast, is just to allow the listener to reflect on their own life and just recognize that where they are is okay. The point where I got to when I started this podcast is a recognition that where I was okay. There was no failure for the fact that I had left my software company that I'd founded and found myself driving vehicles around the UK. There was no failure in that. I was just on a zag. And as one of my earlier guests on this podcast said, one of the things he's learned is that life is the zag. The zag is life. We're effectively saying what you're saying, Chris, that where you are on your life journey is where you're meant to be. Because guess what? If you weren't meant to be there, you wouldn't be there. You'd be somewhere else. And I love the fact that we just keep circling back and coming back to this central refrain, if you like, that I've seen pulling you through your life, is this desire to grow, this desire to learn, this desire to be more, to increase in capacity and all the things that go with it. And just thinking about that, one of the things that you just shared about your role at Microsoft is that you got exposed to the world of small business. Was it that made you want to leave and go out on your own, or something else?
It was something else that was the reason why I left. The small business world, again, gave me experience within another sector and getting to know that sector. And there was an attraction through to the entrepreneurialism and actually building something which I liked. But even though we were targeting that space, we worked through other bigger organizations. So it was, Microsoft is always a partner and a through model. Very, very rarely is it a direct model. I learned an awful lot about partnerships and strategic partnerships. So we would work with Vodafone. So I was part of Windows Mobile when that first came out. So we would take that. We did a partnership with Vodafone to do a campaign out to the small business market to promote Windows Mobile, but also, the Vodafone network. So we were doing lots of partnerships, and we would then put that through the Chambers of Commerce, Federation of Small Business, all these influencer bodies. That I learned so much doing that, which I think sort of really instilled the whole collaboration part of me that is still really, really strong. Working together for mutual benefit is just fantastic when it works. No, the reason why I ended up leaving Microsoft, when I joined Microsoft, there were something like 300 people in the UK, and it was a very entrepreneurial environment. again, I enjoyed Philips because my boss, it was entrepreneurial. You achieve the results that we want, but how you do it's up to you. And Microsoft was the same. Here are your objectives. Off you go. However you want to achieve them, you go fill your boots. Over 7 years, that changed. There was, I think it was more like 3,000 people in the UK. It became very, dare I say it, corporate. I mean, it was corporate before, but it was far more restrictive. It was, this is what we want you to achieve, and this is how you're going to do it.
So you got the bureaucracy that comes with, and the hierarchy that comes with a larger organization.
Yes. And it just took the enjoyment out of what I was doing. So I think I have always enjoyed that freedom, possibly going back to being an only child,
Well, if you hadn't said it, I would have. That's immediately the thought that came to my mind.
Yeah. I enjoy my freedom. I like to do what I want to do in the way I want to do it. And no, it's not always right, but you make mistakes, you learn along the way. And that's, I think, always been my philosophy. Not building the parachute as you come down after jumping out of a plane, but learn by mistakes.
So you made the leap.
Yeah, I made the leap.
Why specifically to starting something on your own and not just moving to a smaller company like a startup where that culture and environment was there to give you what you were looking for?
Well, it's interesting because I was married by this time, and actually I left Microsoft really not knowing what I wanted to do. I often term this the wilderness years.
How old were you?
Mid-40s. So not really knowing what I wanted to do or where I wanted to go. I ended up doing a number of different things, but one of the key things was ended up running the UK arm for an Australian business that was the forerunner to Wix and Squarespace. So a build your own website solution for small businesses.
And forefront of tech again. So you're proving true to form.
Forefront of tech in a market that I knew, i.e. the small business market, selling through channel, which is what I knew from Microsoft. Actually, at Microsoft, I got involved in a number of different projects that were really, really very interesting. So we built the first small business website for what was then the Department of Trade and Industry. It was called the Enterprise Zone. So that was a collaboration between BT, Microsoft, and a web developer. So that got me into the whole area of web development and online. I also got involved in Microsoft's small business website portal, which was called Be Central, more from a strategic point of view than anything else. But that gave me a lot of insight into the online world and into the whole Google world, rise of Google, etc. So running the UK arm for this Australian business was really interesting. And at the same time, I sort of started to do some sort of generic marketing consultancy. So became a consultant in digital marketing based on things that I'd learned and some of the experiences that I had at Microsoft, etc. It was a natural progression. And that was great. I really enjoyed that. It was I had my freedom, the challenge of finding the new customers and then service them, etc. But again, that became another stepping stone. So working like that, a lot of the conversations I had with clients were, I can drive traffic to your website. Your website's rubbish. It's actually a bit of a waste of money. Tended to be a light bulb moment. Can you do something about my website? Strategically, yes. Technically, no. So I partnered with a techie web development business locally to me, and he did all my builds. And at the same time, I worked with a brand print agency, and all her clients were saying, "Can you do web and digital?" And she didn't know where to start, so I was helping her out. And we worked loosely like that for 2 years, I think. And in the end, I went, "Oh, hang on, this is crazy. Why don't we come together as one business? We've got an end-to-end marketing offering." And so that's what we did. And that's what formed the agency. I didn't know I was forming an agency.
You're just taking the next step.
I just saw a business opportunity. There's an opportunity here for the way we work is greater than the sum of the parts. So why don't we do that? And that's what we did. And overnight, we had a full service agency. That was the next sort of big chapter for the next sort of 12 years.
What was your biggest learning in that particular step?
The biggest learning was you need to get things sorted properly from day one. So in terms of sort of governance of a business, we decided it was a third, and a third, which was great. That worked really well because we always got a decision. Ground rules were, you had to respect. If that decision went against you, you had to respect that. But I would say putting those solid, for example, we used to do management accounts every month. Now, a lot of small businesses of that size will wait till the end of the year and the accountant gives it to them. And then, and only then, they work out whether they've got a profit or a loss. Yeah, we ran it as a bigger business, which was, I think, a key learning. There was a lot of business rigor put into the way we operated, which stood us in good stead and gave us a solid foundation for our future growth.
And having been on your non-straight line journey with you, I can see how even focusing on finance in your last year at university would have played a part in that, let alone all of your experience in corporate and, perhaps seeing things not the result of that governance not being there, perhaps with the CD-ROM business with your friend. I can see all of the steps that you took and the gaining in confidence and ability and whatever, putting that in place. Were you the CEO or?
I was appointed the MD. Yes.
Right.
So, however, another learning is, you play to your strengths. My responsibility was really sort of business development and some of the marketing, whereas Lee, my partner, she was brilliant at process and operations. So she took the mantle of HR and sort of the finance stuff as well. So, it is playing to people's strengths and having, what we term now as the right seats on the bus.
Built by the right people.
You got different responsibilities, but having those right people playing to their strengths is so important.
Was that a joyride all the way through? Were there some obviously ups?
Agency world's never a joyride.
What were some of the lows that you experienced at the time? How long did you run your agency for, out of interest?
Why do you go for the lows? Why don't we go for the highs?
We can come to those. I want to see them in contrast. How long did you run your agency for?
We ran that for 12 years. I actually lost my two partners along that journey, which was a shame. They stepped back for health reasons, which was a shame because the power of the business really was what each of us bought individually. But it is what it is. I ended up holding the baby, and opportunity came to sell the business in 2018. Again, I wasn't looking for it. Opportunity came. I sort of got curious, and I think being curious is a huge thing. Always be curious. ABC, because curiosity is what will take you on to that next step. What will drive you forward. So, I think being curious about where opportunity to sell could lead was great because I followed the white rabbit, and it culminated in me selling the business in 2018, and I left the beginning of 2019.
And I dare say that the governance and the rigor that you'd put around how the business operated at the beginning, did that play a factor in how much you were able to sell it for?
Yes and no. I'd love to say that our rigor was so rigorous that it was a natural thing. It wasn't, and you put in place what you need to put in place. But if you're looking to sell a business, the rigor you need is very, very different. So, what do I mean by that? I always say you should run a business as if you're going to sell it tomorrow. Because if you're running a business as if you're going to sell it tomorrow, it means that you're running a good business. You're running a business that somebody will buy. There is value in that business.
So what is it? What is a business from your perspective now? What does a business like that look like?
It needs to be differentiated in the market. It needs to have solid financial management. with sort of clear KPIs. It needs to have a vision and a direction of where it's going. It needs to have a sales engine, sales and marketing engine, because to me they're the same, two sides of the same coin, shall we put it that way. But they need a solid method to get their ideal audience through to becoming a client. They need to be people centric. They need to understand how they deliver, and then the accelerator out of all of that is the processes and systemization. And that's the piece a lot of people don't put into place properly, but that is what people will buy.
I love in that, what I love particularly is how, what a lot of people say in terms of building a business, building and running a business to sell it, they just focus on the systems and the processes. But what I love about what you said is you talked around all the stuff around the outside, which is just so vital, particularly the person-centric side of it, human-centric side of it. And then once you've got that in place, you specifically said the accelerator, the thing that basically turns on the rocket boosters. Those are systems and processes. But I guess in a way they're built in tandem. Are they?
They're built in tandem. What the systems give you is consistency and sort of predictability. Whereas, what most agencies do is they have a sales engine and a delivery engine. And while they're delivering, they're not selling. And then while they're selling, they're not delivering. So you get into this rat wheel of always doing something, but it goes feast and famine. You're either selling or you're delivering.
Common for a lot of business, I would say, not just agencies.
Obviously, yeah, no, it's true. But agencies is my world, and I see it all the time. And you can operate like that, but it's very hard to get out of the weeds and to actually look at what you're going to be doing with your business and where you're going to take it and how you're going to get there.
It's also exhausting as well, just constantly being in that cycle of, as you say, feast and famine.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting, and I learned so much going through the process of selling the business. The value to me wasn't what I got for the business; it was what I learned going through that process.
Well, having been on this journey with you, that doesn't surprise me. Every step you've taken has been about what you're going to learn from it, the capability that's going to increase and the confidence that's going to increase.
But again, it's a stepping stone to what I do now. Because if I hadn't had that experience of running an agency, hadn't had that experience of selling an agency, I would not have the confidence to be able to advise and work with other agencies to improve their business, which is what I do now.
Yeah. So we're now back to that marker in the sand that we placed a little while ago about what you are doing now. So tell me more about that. And I know there's been a few zigs and zags into specifically getting to the adventure brand that you are now. I know you were something else. So just talk us through that, the non-straight line journey that's got you specifically to selling your agency to agency adventure.
Yeah, I mean, we've had more zigs and zags probably in the last 5 years than the rest of my sort of career put together. It was interesting. So come out of selling the business, and it's almost a what next moment again. What am I going to do next? So I started to do some fractional CMO, chief marketing officer roles, so working client side, working for businesses. That was good. I didn't enjoy it as much as being agency side, but what it did show me was that being client side and dealing with agencies, huge room there was for improvement. And that's sort of being kind. The ones we were dealing with were pretty poor in terms of the way they approached, the way they sold, the way they delivered. I knew there was a lot of room for opportunity there to help other agencies along their journey. So that's really where I actually got a direction. I've actually there's something here that I want to do. I want to be able to help other agencies to be successful, whatever that definition may be. Yeah, so we started off just by running local networking events for agency owners. And I'm in Buckinghamshire, so we ran them in Buckinghamshire, and we were getting 40, 50 people to these events, and they loved it. And it was agency networking event with a couple of talks around a topic of running an agency, so business focused. And because we were getting that sort of number of people coming through, I thought, okay, we can probably add a bit more value by having like a membership structure and then sort of running more focused workshops on specific elements of running your agency business. So the membership was due to launch March 2020. So it's all about timing.
Yeah. Ain't that the truth?
So that went on hold. Agency world exploded with COVID. Agencies just fell into freefall because clients were going, no, putting all my marketing on hold, don't know what's happening in the world. We're going to stop everything. So agencies lost half their businesses overnight and went into complete panic mode. So for me, it was an opportunity. So, okay, how can we support you through this? So we started putting on loads of webinars online. Everything moved from in-person to online. We put loads of things all around COVID-related issues to begin with, how to furlough staff, where to get grants from, all those things. And then gradually as things settled, they became more mainstream. And then we did eventually launch the membership a bit later on. So we became a membership organization and an events business. So the way we were supporting agencies were through knowledge. And I thought that was the right thing to do. The other thing that we did in COVID was put together groups, which we call Better Together groups. They were therapy sessions initially. But what became evident was, okay, right, you're in this situation now. You want to get to there. What activities do you need to do to get there? So planning. They became what we call 90-day planning groups, which we still run under the agency adventure as Maze Planner. Hugely powerful, hugely powerful. During this time, we were called Agency Local, and it was a brand built up by osmosis. By the time we came out of lockdown and everything changed, it was obvious that Agency Local was not fit for purpose as a brand. It was getting in the way. So people would go, where's local? Am I local? What do you mean by local? So it was just getting, because we got online, local didn't matter because it's wherever you were. The other realizations was that running a membership or building a membership is really difficult. And in agency world, you're competing with lots of other memberships. So you're competing with that share of wallet. And then the third realization that went along with that was we were looking more like an events company. And I really wanted it to be a more proactive support company for agencies.
Support and education.
The realization was that we were running these events and they were great events, some fantastic knowledge. And people would come along and they'd go, that was really good. I've made lots and lots of notes. Thank you. Then do nothing with them. So the impact we were having really was fairly negligible because they weren't taking any action. So we changed the brand and we built a brand by design, by purpose, and hence the agency adventure. We've had so much fun building the brand. It's been brilliant. But the model changed. We got rid of the membership, got rid of the events because we decided that we wanted to have a greater impact with a fewer number of people. So hence working more on a one-to-one basis or in focus groups. So now that's what we do. So we work as guides. We call ourselves guides under the Agency Adventure banner. So that's mentoring, coaching, consulting, advising, educating, training, motivating. It's more than coaching for me. So guide is our terminology, and we work with agency owners on their journey to hopefully make it not too zigzag, but to be there if there is a zag that happens on that journey. We have an infrastructure that we can support agencies in every different area. So we have our partner, what we call our partners in residence. These are experts in different business disciplines. In my experience, I'm fairly much a generalist. I know a lot about a lot to be really dangerous. Okay. But I'm not an expert in finance, HR, sales journey, culture, all the rest of it. So we've got our partners that are experts in those areas for agencies. So agencies can come to us with their challenges or whatever, and we can support them in every which way.
That's brilliant. There are two things that I've taken out of that bit of your journey that you've told me about there is that you've incorporated the two big themes that seem to have run through your life. One is, I've lost count of the number of times you use the word we when talking about agency adventure. So it's evidence that you're living your beliefs about collaboration and working in team. And also you're in education. That's a theme that has been there all the way through. You know, you're looking to support and help, but ultimately there has to be education there for the agency owners, because if they already knew what to do, they'd probably do it. Although that's not always true, I know, but I'm sure there is an element of
The biggest challenge is they don't know what they don't know.
yeah. It must. How do you feel at the stage of life that you're at now, particularly having just taken an hour and a half reflecting on how you've got to where you are now? How do you feel?
You know what they say, if you're doing something that you love, then it's not a job.
You never work a day in your life.
Yeah. And that is where I've got myself to now.
Brilliant.
Yeah. I love what I do. I love helping people. That's one of my biggest things. I love helping people. I can see a future for what we're doing with the agency adventure, and it's growing. I've taken on an associate guide in a guy called Tom Wilson, and he's brilliant. He's really become sort of a partner in the business, and we're really shaping what we do and how we represent it together, which is great. Over the next year, we will be increasing the number of guides that we have working under us. They're independent, but they're all people that have been on the journey of growing, scaling, running, developing, and selling an agency. So they've all been there, done it, got the T-shirt, got the scars, know what they're talking about, and have a shared sort of goal of helping us to create better run agencies, and agencies that can deliver on the owner's goals and aspirations, whatever they may be, because they're going to be different. They're always different. So we treat everybody as individuals. Everything that we do is bespoke to that agency, because their journey is going to be different. Nobody's been on my journey apart from me. It's the same for any agency owner, whether they've been doing it 5 years or 50 years. Nobody's been on that journey. Their aspirations, what they want to achieve, is completely different to the next person. They may have the same aspirations, but the way they want to achieve it will be different. So we work with them within those dynamics to make sure that they achieve what they want to achieve.
Yeah, and possibly even help them figure that out if they're not sure. It sounds like if I owned an agency, it sounds like almost like a no-brainer. Very powerful proposition. There is one other thing I want to ask you about, Chris, and this is in the context of knowing when this particular episode is going to be published. I generally don't know when that is, but this episode is going to be published in the second week of January, just after Laura West's episode is published on the 1st of January. And with those two things in mind, you probably know what I'm going to ask you about now. Because those two episodes together are part of the launch of... Over to you.
Yeah, Laura and I have come together, and in fact, it's completely Laura's idea. It's genius. She came to me a month and a half ago, said, I've got this idea. I'd love to run it past you and see what you think. And she did, and I went, wow, that is going to be brilliant. That will make such a difference. How can I help? So, well, if this is going out in January, we should have launched.
Yeah, well, we will already have heard about it from Laura. That's one of the reasons that her episode is going out on the 1st of January. So what is your you haven't even said the name. Agency Aid is what we're talking about. What did you see in Laura's idea? Bearing in mind, as I've had a chat with Laura, and she says that she doesn't just have ideas. She actually goes into Canva and draws up business plans and stuff for ideas that she has. So what was it about this particular idea that she brought to you that gave you that reaction and sort of made you want to devote time to it?
It's one of those things that you go, why is that not already there? Why is that not in existence? Why is nobody else doing this? And the fact that it can galvanize our whole industry, I think is absolutely awesome. If we can create, we talk about business for good, I want to create an industry for good. if we've got the whole of the marketing and creative world doing things that will raise money for charities, for good causes, and make it easy for them to do it. I think that's one of the key challenges for agencies that they have the right intention, but they don't quite know how to do it. So, they could do a sponsored walk. Oh, well, who are we going to give it to? I don't know. If they can do it under agency aid, it's just easy. We're doing it for agency aid. There's a big infrastructure behind that, a lot of visibility. We're going to be very clear where that money goes to what causes. Also, it gives them the freedom to do stuff themselves, but we account it in terms of having an overall tally of what the agency world has provided to good causes, in a year.
Yeah. Well, I'm not surprised that you had the reaction you did, because I bit on the hook, one of the hooks that Laura put out a few weeks ago. She's very secret. Chris and I were working on something in the background. I bit and had a chat with her about it. And I'm incredibly proud to be a founding member of Agency Aid, and just really excited to be a part of the journey. And part of that is releasing your and Laura's episodes in the first week of your launch of Agency Aid. So we get the message out there.
Yeah, no, and it's great because it's not just agencies. It's agencies predominantly, but it's also agency communities that are out there, and it's also suppliers to the agency industry,
and freelance as well. So if you're in the orbit of the agency design, sort of creative input into businesses, Agency Aid is just a really great way of giving back.
It's for everybody. It's a vehicle for everybody to be able to give back, definitely. And we really appreciate your support as well, Pete.
It's a pleasure. So Agency Adventure is agency-adventure.com. And where can people find out more about Agency Aid? Where can the listener find out about Agency Aid?
On the website, but we haven't actually launched that yet. You can put something in the notes when we're there. But yeah, Agency Aid people will know about it.
Yeah, great, wonderful. So I've just got a couple of remaining questions for you. The first, you talked about how Agency Adventure, one of the things that's giving you the most satisfaction is being able to help agency owners on their journey. So the question I have for you is, how can the listener of this episode and myself help you right now the most?
I think if you come across anybody in the creative world that is stuck, lacking confidence, not sure what decision to make, where to go, where they want to take their business, they're having challenges in their business, then just get in touch, because we have an infrastructure that will support you through all of that and beyond.
Wonderful.
So, because one of the things we're looking to do is create the agencies of the future. And that means two things. You've got to be around in the future, but also create the agency that you want in the future.
That's brilliant. And the last question then, I don't know if you've listened to any previous episodes of the podcast, but the last question I ask every guest is, whose non-straight line journey do you want to hear? Which episode of the podcast, when you see it land in your podcast app, when you see that I'm in conversation with somebody, you say to yourself, yeah, that's a journey that I want to hear about. Who comes to mind?
Oh, crumbs. I think you should speak to Tom Wilson, the other agency adventure guide.
And will you be able to effect an introduction there?
I'll tell you. Yeah.
Or is there somebody else coming to mind as well?
Somebody else that sort of pulls a lot of this together. And I would be very interested in hearing his story. And I will introduce you. He's run an agency and he runs charity cycle events. And the agency is now metamorphosed into sort of a SaaS company supplying a product to agencies. He's just somebody that I think would be really interesting to know his story.
And who's that?
John Redman.
John Redman.
Redman.
Wonderful. Well, I got two for the price of one there, Tom Wilson and John Redman. And if you're able to introduce me to both, that'd be amazing.
I will do indeed.
Well, all that remains for me to say, Chris, is thank you so much for sharing your non-straight line journey with me and the listener. It's been a pleasure. I've learned stuff about you that I didn't know, and I really hope that you're able to use your episode, both to grow Agency Adventure and also to do all the amazing things you want to do with Agency Aid. I expect to see your and Laura episodes very prominent on the all of the publicity for Agency Aid, primarily because it's going to give people that are thinking about joining Agency Aid a real insight into the values and ethos and the humans that have started it. That's one of the great things about these episodes.
Thank you, and thank you for having me on, Pete. I'd actually say I probably learned something myself about myself, and it's only when you start talking about these things that you join some of the dots.
What did you join? I'm really curious.
The search for entrepreneurialism, where my belief of things happen for a reason come from. Every step, everything that you're doing is a different step along a journey, and you may not know where that journey's going. In fact, we don't ever know where that journey's going. All we can do is learn and grow in the moment and make sure that stays with us and fuels the energy and the direction for the next step.
Take the step, live the zag, and just keep moving. You can keep moving forward even if it's not in a straight line.
Yeah, and there's no such thing as failure.
Thank you, Chris.
Cheers, Pete.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of Not a Straight Line. If this conversation helped to reorient your internal compass or inspired you in any way, please let us know by heading to podcast.notastraightline.life/rate and leave a rating and review. Thanks, as always, to Matthew Bliss of MB Podcast Services for his exquisite engineering of this episode. If you'd like him to help you with your podcast, contact details are in the show notes. And if you'd like to be a guest on the show, or there's someone whose non-straight line journey you'd just love to hear, then please visit podcast.notastraightline.life/guest. Thanks for being here with me, and I'll see you next week for another amazing, deep, inspiring non-straight line journey. Love you.